The storm outside screamed against the glass, but Alex sat unmoved before a wall of monitors, code spilling like fire across the screen. His hands shook as he whispered, "It's now or never." Alarms shrieked, and red warnings erupted in a cascade of chaos. A chilling voice broke through his headset. The antagonist said, "You've gone too far, Alex." Betrayal burned through him, sudden and sharp, as shadows closed in around the room. The world shifted in that instant, forcing him into a choice he could never turn back from. The apartment burned in silence, smoke curling from shattered screens as Alex stumbled through debris. The storm outside swallowed him whole as he climbed down the fire escape, rain slashing his bruised skin. He whispered, "They knew I was coming, someone tipped them off." Neon shadows flickered across the wet streets, ghosts of a city that had always turned its back on him. His lungs burned, his heart pounded, and for the first time he realized the betrayal wasn't just a wound, it was a trap. A shadow stepped from the corner, hand gripping his arm with unyielding force. "James," the ally said, "you're bleeding, Alex, and worse, you're exposed." Alex's glare held both anger and suspicion, but his body trembled with exhaustion. Sirens wailed in the distance, each second closing in like jaws. James pulled him forward, urgency etched in his every move. The trust between them, fragile and scarred, bent under the weight of survival. For Alex, the storm was no longer outside, it lived in the man pulling him through it. They slipped into an abandoned subway station, the hum of flickering lights echoing through empty tunnels. "What?" Alex muttered. "Someone close sold me out." James said, "Then you'd better decide who to trust before you get us both killed." Silence pressed heavy, broken only by water dripping from rusted pipes. Alex sat on the cold steps, fists tight against his knees, suspicion gnawing at every thought. In this underworld, allies looked like enemies, and enemies wore the mask of friends. A single monitor in the control room buzzed alive, its glow casting a ghostly blue. The antagonist's voice cut through static like a blade. He said, "Run as far as you want, Alex. Every shadow you hide in belongs to me." Alex's jaw clenched as fire rose beneath the exhaustion, fists curling. James' gaze hardened, the reality of the hunt pressing on him too. The trap was bigger than they'd imagined. Alex's vow formed silently in his chest, truth or death, nothing in between. The abandoned station reeked of smoke and damp stone, but the silence was worse. Alex sat with his back against the wall, chest heaving, doubts consuming him. The mentor stepped from the shadows, his voice calm, yet edged with urgency. The mentor said, "You're chasing fire, Alex, and fire consumes everything." Alex looked up, anger wrestling with exhaustion. He whispered, "If I stop, they win." The old man's eyes held decades of scars, reflecting his own battles with truth and regret. Alex felt the weight of a choice too heavy for one man, yet it was his alone to carry. Later, in the quiet shelter of a hidden loft, the storm outside softened to a whisper. Sarah, the love interest, cleaned the blood from Alex's face, her hands trembling despite her calm. Sarah said, "You don't always have to carry this alone." His eyes searched hers, desperate for truth but terrified of weakness. He muttered, "If I lean on you, you'll fall with me." Her smile was fragile, yet her resolve burned bright. She whispered, "Then we'll fall together." In her presence, Alex felt the storm pause. If only for a moment. James paced the room, frustration echoing in every step. His voice cut sharp against the silence. James said, "You're dragging us into a war we can't win." Alex lifted his head, defiance in his tone. "It's not a war if I don't fight back. It's surrender." Their eyes locked, tension sparking like steel against stone. Trust had been fractured, and suspicion bled through every word. Yet beneath James' anger was a shadow of fear, not for himself, but for Alex, the man who dared to stand against giants. The silence broke with memory. Alex's mind slipped back to a darkened bedroom, screens glowing green as a teenage boy tested forbidden doors for the first time. His younger self typed furiously, face alight with the thrill of discovery. But his eyes told another story: loneliness, hunger for worth, a desperate need to be seen. The world outside ignored him, but in that room he felt powerful. That night, Alex realized knowledge was both his salvation and his curse. It was the beginning of a path that would consume his life. The memory dissolved into the present as the mentor leaned close, voice heavy with warning. He said, "Every truth carries a price, and not all prices are worth paying." Alex's jaw tightened, anger simmering beneath his silence. James glanced away, distrust deepening. Sarah's hand lingered on Alex's shoulder, her eyes pleading with him to stop before he shattered completely. The air grew heavy, every heartbeat a reminder of betrayal waiting unseen. Alex whispered, "I'd rather burn than live in their lies." The vow settled, final and unyielding. The city skyline glowed like a circuit board, alive with secrets. Alex broke into a corporate data fortress, screens reflecting endless lines of code as his breath grew shallow. He whispered, "This is where the truth begins." Every firewall that crumbled revealed more shadows, more danger. James muttered behind him, "You're moving too fast." But Alex's eyes blazed with defiance. In that moment, the system wasn't just numbers, it was a battlefield. Every keystroke was a bullet, and every line of code was war. The monitors flickered violently, alarms screaming. A deadly trap snapped shut within the system, locking Alex in digital crossfire. He muttered, "It's a kill switch." James cursed, grabbing his arm. Sparks shot from the console, the room trembling like a collapsing cage. Alex's heart raced as red text screamed across the screen: "Intruder identified." He had seconds to decide: pull out and live, or push forward and risk annihilation. The walls around him felt less like a room, more like a coffin waiting to close. Through the chaos, a mocking voice echoed, smooth yet venomous. The foil stepped into view on another monitor. The foil said, "We're not so different, Alex. You dig for truth, I dig for survival." Alex's jaw tightened, fury in his eyes. He whispered, "You sold out. I never will." The foil smirked, his words sharp as glass. "You call it betrayal. I call it staying alive." The moment was like staring into a twisted mirror, a reflection of what Alex could have become, and what he feared most. The system roared back to life as files streamed onto the screen, but something darker lurked within. James' voice cracked. "Where did you get this access?" Alex froze, suspicion crawling like fire through his veins. The alien's eyes betrayed secrets never spoken, shadows clinging to his silence. For the first time, Alex wondered if trust had already cost him too much. Betrayal was no longer a possibility. It was a certainty waiting to strike. Every heartbeat felt like a countdown, every glance a loaded weapon. Suddenly, every screen in the room shifted. The antagonist appeared in crystal clarity, his smile sharp as a blade. The antagonist said, "You thought you were hunting me, Alex, but I've owned this game from the start." Alex's blood froze as the realization hit. He was never in control. Sparks erupted again, the room drowning in alarms. James stepped forward, eyes narrowing in dread. Alex clenched his fists, defiance surging against the fear. For the first time, the enemy was no longer faceless. He was flesh, blood, and unstoppable power. Alex's fingers flew across the keys as encrypted files unraveled, revealing a global conspiracy stretching from boardrooms to battlefields. His eyes widened in horror as names scrolled, people who had vanished now linked to a single machine. He muttered, "This isn't just corruption, it's control." James's jaw clenched, unease crawling through him. For the first time, Alex saw the entire world as a prison, built brick by brick with lies. The truth was more terrifying than any weapon, and it was now burning in his hands. Sarah's voice trembled as she read the files over Alex's shoulder. Her face paled at the names, her own father among them. She whispered, He was part of this." Alex turned, fury clashing with sympathy. He said, "They've used you to get to me." Her hands shook as tears burned her eyes. The revelation was no longer just a war of data, it was a war of bloodlines. For Sarah, betrayal was not distant. It had lived at her table, smiled in her home, and now stood as part of the enemy. James' voice broke the silence, sharper than a blade. He said, "You think you can handle this, Alex? You'll drag us all into the grave." Alex turned, fury igniting. "If you're with me, stand. If not, leave now." James' eyes flickered, guilt buried deep, as if his loyalty had cracks too wide to hide. The air between them thickened, distrust drowning the last of their bond. For Alex, every ally was turning stranger. Betrayal wasn't waiting outside, it was breathing in the same room. The night erupted as masked enforcers stormed the streets, hunting Alex and his companions. Sirens wailed, bullets cracked through the rain, and neon lights smeared into chaos. Alex shouted, "Move," as he dragged Sarah into cover. James fired back blindly, fury and fear mixing in every motion. The city no longer looked alive, it looked like a trap closing its jaws. Betrayal was not hidden anymore. It was open war, painted across the streets in fire and storm. Every shadow now carried death. Back underground, the mentor finally spoke, his voice heavy with decades of regret. He said, "I should have told you earlier. He and I were once brothers in this fight." Alex froze, rage mixing with disbelief. "You knew the enemy all along?" The old man's eyes lowered, shame carved into every wrinkle. Betrayal had not just come from allies, but from the man who had guided him, the voice he trusted most. Truth was supposed to free him, but it only chained him tighter to lies that had shaped his entire life. The chamber flickered alive with harsh white light as the antagonist stepped forward, no longer a phantom but flesh and blood. He said, "You've been chasing shadows, Alex, but every step you took was mine." Alex's breath hitched as he saw the truth the enemy had guided him from the start. His mind screamed, piecing together every trap, every whisper of betrayal. James froze, his fists trembling, as though he too had known. The revelation tore through the room, leaving Alex hollow, yet burning. The hunter had always been the hunted. The foil's voice sliced through the tension, mocking and sharp. He said, "Why fight him, Alex, when you could be him? You and I are the same." Alex's jaw tightened, fury surging. He said, "No, you chose to rot in their lies." The foil leaned closer on the screen, his smirk spreading. "And you'll drown in your truth." The words echoed like prophecy, a twisted reflection of Alex's soul. The room felt smaller, as if the walls were mirrors, each one reflecting who Alex could have been, who he feared to become. The sound of betrayal came not from words but silence. James lowered his eyes, stepping back. Alex's heart sank as the ally muttered, "I had no choice." Alex's rage cracked the air. He said, "You were my brother." James' hands shook as he whispered, "They have something on me." The truth hit harder than any bullet. Betrayal wasn't loud, it was quiet. A knife slipped between ribs. Alex saw the line drawn, trust was broken, and the man he had depended on now stood against him. The files poured across the screen, no longer fragments but the full map of the conspiracy. It wasn't money or power, it was control of every human choice, every life calculated in silence. Alex whispered, "They built a world where freedom never existed." Sarah's breath caught, her tears falling freely. The antagonist's voice was calm, almost tender. "This is order, Alex, and order is salvation." But Alex saw only chains, invisible yet unbreakable. The truth was worse than the lies. It was a machine designed to erase humanity. The air froze as Sarah stepped forward, her face caught between terror and strength. The antagonist said, "Choose, girl. Stand with him or bury him." Her body trembled as she looked at Alex, fear warring with love. He whispered, "Don't let him break you." Her tears fell, and she whispered, "If I stay, I die with you." The silence was more violent than any explosion. For Alex, this was the cruelest twist of all. The fight for truth demanded the one thing he couldn't bear to lose her. The data fortress pulsed like a living machine, cables hissing as sparks fell from the ceiling. Alex charged forward, his hoodie torn, determination burning through exhaustion. James followed reluctantly, guilt gnawing at his steps. The antagonist's voice boomed through hidden speakers. "Welcome to your end, Alex." He ignored it, planting the final device onto the core console. He said, "If I fall, your truth falls with me." The room roared with alarms, a countdown beginning, every second drawing them closer to destruction. The mentor stumbled into the fray, his body weakened but eyes alight with final resolve. He shouted, "Go, Alex!" before throwing himself against armed enforcers buying precious seconds. Alex froze in horror. "No!" he cried, but the mentor's voice thundered one last time, "Carry the truth further than I could." Gunfire erupted, sparks raining down as the old man's sacrifice split the battlefield. Grief carved into Alex's chest, but he forced his legs forward. The torch had passed, and it was now his burden alone. The foil emerged from the shadows, face glistening with sweat, eyes wild with conviction. He said, "This is your last chance, Alex. Join me and live, or resist and die a ghost." Alex's voice shook with fury. "Better a ghost than a traitor." The foil laughed bitterly, raising his weapon. "Then die proving nothing." Their clash was raw, brutal, two reflections colliding in chaos. Every punch, every blow, felt like Alex striking the man he might have become. The fight was not for survival alone. It was for identity. Finally, Alex faced the antagonist at the heart of the fortress. The older man stood calm, his suit untouched by chaos, his smile unshaken. The antagonist said, "You think truth liberates, but it destroys order." Alex raised his fists, his voice breaking. "Then, let it destroy." The monitors behind them flickered with collapsing code as the system began to fail. The duel was no longer man versus man. It was truth against lies, freedom against control. Sparks showered as they collided, every strike shaking the foundation of the machine. The countdown blared its final warning, the fortress collapsing around them. Alex slammed the final command into the console, his voice steady despite the chaos. "Truth deserves to be free." The system exploded with light as data streamed into the world. The antagonist lunged, but Alex stood firm, knowing the cost. For a heartbeat, silence hung heavy, then the fortress tore itself apart. Alex's vow was complete. He had chosen truth over survival, and in that choice, he became more than a hacker. He became a martyr for freedom. The world awoke to chaos as streams of data flooded the networks, exposing corruption, betrayal, and hidden crimes. Governments reeled, corporations collapsed, and ordinary people stared at screens filled with truths once buried. Alex's sacrifice had torn the mask from the world. News anchors shouted in disbelief, voices trembling as history shifted in real time. For the first time, silence no longer protected the powerful. The world bled, but it bled with honesty. His final act had set a fire that no storm could extinguish. James sat alone in the ruins of the fortress, his face stained with guilt and regret. The man who had once fought beside Alex now felt the weight of betrayal heavier than chains. He whispered, "You gave everything, and I gave you nothing." His voice broke in the silence. The world outside celebrated truth, but inside his chest, there was only failure. Betrayal had spared his life, but stolen his soul. James understood that survival without honor was worse than death, and Alex's ghost would haunt him forever. Sarah stood at a cracked window, city lights flickering beyond the glass. Her hands trembled as she whispered, "You kept your promise, Alex, but you left me with the ashes." Tears carved down her cheeks as she pressed her forehead to the cold pain. The city was alive with revolution, yet her heart drowned in grief. For her, victory was not triumph but loss. Love had given her strength, but it had also left her broken. She would carry his memory like a wound that never healed, a scar made of truth. In the underground corners of the digital world, Alex's name became a signal. Hackers whispered his story, building movements in his shadow. His code, his final command, spread like wildfire, a torch passed to countless hands. The oppressed found hope in his sacrifice, and the powerful trembled at the thought of his legacy. He had become more than a man. He was an idea, unstoppable and eternal. Truth no longer belonged to the few. It belonged to the world, and Alex had lit the path in blood and flame. A single line of text lingered on every screen across the globe. Alex's final message: "The truth will outlive me." The world stared in silence, haunted and shaken. For some, it was hope. For others, it was fear. His voice was gone, but his defiance echoed louder than ever. The silence after was not empty, it was eternal. Alex had chosen sacrifice, and in doing so, he had become immortal in memory. The hacker who risked everything left behind not just chaos, but a dangerous path of truth no one could erase.